Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I'm 33 years old. I am a housewife, and as I stand here today, I can't help but think about my life. It's like a web, made up of different threads of duty, expectations, and the quiet sacrifices made by the people we love. My story isn't just about me. It's also about my father. He was a kind and gentle man who got pulled into the demands of my married life without really realizing it. 6 years ago, life seemed simpler. I lived in a small, cozy house on the edge of the city with my husband, Jack, and his mother, Cheryl. You might think this sounds like a happy family setup, but there was a problem. My place in that house came with an unspoken rule. My father had to pay for everything. Every month, he quietly took care of all our bills. He never complained or showed any discomfort, but I could see how hard it was for him. Living with Jack and Cheryl wasn't easy. It was like walking on a tightrope. Cheryl, with her strong personality and sharp words, never hid what she expected. She would often say, "It's better this way, Lauren. Your father can afford it, and it keeps the family comfortable." Her tone always made it clear that this wasn't really a request, but more like an order. As for Jack, he didn't say much. He just stood by, letting things happen. His silence was loud, almost as if he agreed with everything that was going on without needing to say it. Even though it was tough, I loved Jack and believed in the commitments I made when we got married. That's what kept me there, in that house, hoping things would somehow get better. Every day, I wished for a change. I wanted a sign that things could be different, that we could be a real family, one bound by love, not money. But deep down, I knew that I was holding on to a dream that wasn't real. It was a fantasy, and it was slowly being crushed by the weight of unspoken rules and fake smiles. Now, as I sit here thinking about those years, I realize how much they shaped me. They taught me about being strong, about the bittersweet truths of love and family. But the hardest part of my life was still ahead of me. It all began with a phone call that changed everything. The day my father died was the day my world fell apart. I remember every detail like it happened yesterday. The phone call was urgent, and I rushed to the hospital. The halls there were cold and empty, as if they were grieving with me. My father had suffered a sudden heart attack, and even though the doctors tried, he was gone before I had the chance to say goodbye. In the days after his death, I was surrounded by deep grief. I didn't just lose my father. I lost the very foundation of my life. He had been my rock, the quiet strength that helped me through every hard moment. Without him, I felt lost. Everything changed after that. My father had always been there for me, and now he was gone. I wasn't just mourning him, but also the safety and stability he had provided. It was like my entire world had shifted, and I wasn't sure how to go on without him. I felt lost, like I was drifting through a sea of emotions that I couldn't control. During this difficult time, I received a call from my father's lawyer. He asked me to come to his office to talk about my father's will. It felt strange to think about something like a will when I was still grieving. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, everything seemed cold and organized, the complete opposite of how I felt. I sat there in silence as the lawyer explained what my father had left for me, his only child. He told me that my father had left me $80 million and a beautiful house in one of the best neighborhoods in the city. The amount of money was so large that it didn't seem real. I could hardly believe it. A part of me even wished there had been some kind of mistake. I went home feeling the heavy weight of this inheritance on my shoulders. As soon as I stepped through the door, I noticed that something had changed. Cheryl, my mother-in-law, who usually looked at me with cold, calculating eyes, now had a different look, one of greed. She cornered me in the living room, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Lauren," she started, but soon her tone changed, becoming firm and demanding. "You need to transfer the $80 million to my account and give the house to Jack. It's what's best for the family." Her demand hung in the air like a dark cloud. I was still struggling with the pain of losing my father, and now my mother-in-law wasn't offering me any comfort or support. Instead, she saw this moment as a chance to take something for herself and her son. I couldn't believe the nerve she had to ask me to give away everything my father had left me. In that moment, I realized that their kindness had never been real. It had only lasted as long as my father could provide for us. "I can't do that, Cheryl," I said, my voice sounding stronger than I felt inside. "That money and the house were my father's final gift to me. I won't let anyone take that from me." Cheryl's face twisted in shock, and then her expression turned to rage. She stepped closer to me, her voice now a threatening whisper. "You will regret this decision, Lauren. I promise you that." As I stood there, refusing to give in to her, the house suddenly felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in on me, and I could feel that a storm was coming. I had stood up to Cheryl for the first time, but I didn't know what the cost would be. I knew that my life was about to be turned upside down, and I braced myself for whatever would come next. The fallout from my decision was quick and harsh. In just a few days, the home I shared with Jack and Cheryl became a battlefield. The air was thick with hostility, and the silence between us was full of accusations. Jack, the man I had once loved and trusted, now looked at me with confusion and resentment. He seemed torn between his mother's manipulations and the life we had built together. Things reached their breaking point one cold morning when Jack handed me divorce papers. His hands were steady, but he couldn't meet my eyes. "Lauren, this is how it has to be," he mumbled, almost like he was talking to himself. His words felt like a dagger to my heart, already bruised from everything I had been through. I couldn't believe it had come to this, but deep down, I knew that this was the price I had to pay for standing up for myself. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just losing a husband. I was being thrown away because I no longer fit into the life they had planned for me. With a trembling hand, I signed the divorce papers. My signature was more than just ink on paper. It marked the end of one chapter of my life and the start of a new, uncertain one. As I packed my things to leave, Cheryl stood in the doorway, watching me with a satisfied smirk on her face. She couldn't hide the cruelty in her voice when she said, "You brought this on yourself." Her words stung, but I didn't respond. I just kept packing, knowing I was leaving behind a life where I was never really valued. Once the divorce was finalized, and I was officially on my own, I moved into the home my father had left me. It was a beautiful, large estate, very different from the small house I had just been pushed out of. Alone in this big house, with its long hallways and empty rooms, I struggled to find any sense of normalcy. The silence felt overwhelming at times, but I reminded myself that this was my new beginning, even if it felt strange and lonely. But life wasn't done throwing challenges at me. Not long after I moved in, I learned that Jack had been in a bad accident at work. He was a security guard and something went wrong, leaving him with a broken leg. He couldn't work anymore. The irony didn't escape me. He had once been strong and confident, but now he was out of a job and helpless. A few days later, Jack showed up at my doorstep, leaning on crutches. His face was full of desperation. He looked like a completely different person from the man I had once loved. "Lauren, I need help," he said, his voice quiet and uncertain. "I've made mistakes, but I'm in a bad place. I can't work, and I don't have anywhere else to go." I could see the pain in his eyes, and part of me wanted to help him. I could see he was hoping I would forgive him and help him pick up the pieces. But the wounds from our past were still too fresh. The betrayal was still too deep for me to overlook. I had learned the hard way that I needed to put myself first, no matter how much it hurt to say no. "I'm sorry, Jack," I said, my voice steady, though I felt a storm inside. "I can't. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine." As I closed the door on Jack, it felt like I was closing the door on my old life as well. The final connection to that painful chapter was gone. It was time for me to focus on rebuilding not just my home, but my entire life. The journey ahead was mine alone, and I knew I had to move forward, stronger and more determined than before. As I settled into my new reality, the quiet, empty rooms of the house my father left me no longer felt so lonely. Instead, they started to feel full of possibilities. This house, with its beautiful gardens and sunlit hallways, was a place where I could start over. It was where I would find myself again. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready. The struggles of my past had taught me to be resilient. Now, it was time for me to build a life on my own terms, without anyone else trying to control me. This was my chance to rise from the ashes, stronger and wiser, and create a future that truly belonged to me. I began to imagine a new purpose for my life, one that would not only help me heal, but also give back to others. I thought about creating a safe and welcoming place for elderly people who didn't have a home of their own. This idea was inspired by my father's dream of always wanting to help the community. He had a deep desire to give back, and I wanted to honor that. I decided to turn my estate into a home for the elderly. My goal wasn't just to provide them with a place to stay, but to build a lively and warm community where they could share their stories, wisdom, and laughter. I wanted it to be a place where people could feel at home and truly live out their golden years with joy. I put all my heart, energy, and resources into fixing up the estate. I worked on every room, making sure that each space felt comfortable and welcoming. Every small detail mattered, from the furniture to the decorations. I wanted the house to feel like a place full of warmth and kindness. The work was hard and tiring, but at the same time, it was incredibly rewarding. With every new thing I added to the home, I felt a bit of my old pain healing. The physical effort of renovating the house was also healing for my emotional wounds. As I worked day by day, I finally started to accept the end of my marriage and the betrayal that came with it. I realized that building this new home was not only creating a future for others, but also helping me move forward from my past. As the house neared completion, I started meeting the people who might move in. Each elderly person I spoke to had a unique story to share, and their faces showed a lifetime of experiences. There was hope in their eyes, and I could see they were looking forward to this new chapter in their lives. I listened closely to their stories, which were full of strength, resilience, and life lessons. Soon, the house started to fill with its new residents. The once empty rooms were now alive with conversation and laughter. One of the first residents, Mrs. Theresa May, stood out. She was an energetic 85-year-old with bright eyes and a love for storytelling. She quickly became the heart of our little community, sharing stories from her youth that were both funny and wise. Every evening, she would gather everyone in the common room, filling the space with laughter and sometimes even a few tears. One evening, while we were watching the sunset from the porch, Mrs. May turned to me and said, "It's all about making the most of every day, dear." Her words hit me deeply, reminding me that time is precious, and it's important to live every moment fully. In this new life, I found joy in the simple things. We shared meals together, celebrated birthdays, and spent time just listening to each other. The house was no longer just a building. It had become a living, breathing community. The people who lived there had created a home filled with love and connection, woven together by the shared experiences of their lives. In this vibrant community, I rediscovered myself. I was no longer tied down by the pain of my past, but instead, I embraced the future with hope. I was ready for whatever came next. My father's dream had come true, not just in the home itself, but in the community it had nurtured. By fulfilling this dream, I found healing, happiness, and a renewed sense of purpose in life. I had found a new purpose in life, and with it came a deep sense of peace. The simple act of helping others had given me a fresh start, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at home. As the seasons changed, so did my heart. The home for the elderly blossomed under my care, and with each passing day, I felt more joy and love surrounding me. My heart grew fuller with every laugh, every smile, and every story shared by the people who now lived there. One day, while doing something as routine as visiting the local bank to manage the finances for the home, fate had a surprise in store for me. As I stepped up to the bank manager's desk, I froze for a moment, recognizing a familiar face. "Scott," I said, my voice filled with surprise. It was Scott, my childhood friend. He sat behind the desk, looking every bit the professional, but with the same warm eyes and gentle smile that had once been a source of comfort to me when we were kids. Back in our school days, we had shared many happy memories together. Now here he was after all these years. "Lauren, it's been ages," he said, his voice full of genuine happiness. We started talking, catching up on everything we had missed over the years. It was like no time had passed at all. We laughed about old times, remembering how we used to race our bicycles down the neighborhood streets and spend afternoons talking about our dreams. Yet, we were no longer those carefree children. We had grown up, and our lives had taken very different paths. As time went on, our meetings at the bank became more frequent. Every time we met, our connection grew stronger. It wasn't long before Scott started visiting the home for the elderly, taking an interest in the work I was doing. His visits meant so much to me. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely interested in the residents, and he brought so much joy and laughter to everyone he met. Scott's calm and steady presence was a breath of fresh air for me. After all the difficult and painful relationships I had been through, it felt good to have someone who was kind, dependable, and caring. He didn't just listen to me. He truly engaged with me and the people in my life. The residents adored him, and he became a regular visitor, always brightening their days. One crisp autumn evening, we took a walk through the gardens of the home, as we often did. The air was cool, and the leaves were starting to change color, painting the ground in shades of orange and gold. As we walked, Scott suddenly stopped and turned to face me. His expression was serious, but tender, and I could see that he had something important on his mind. "Lauren," he began, his hands nervously fidgeting with a small box he had pulled from his pocket. "I've seen you bring so much happiness to others, and you've brought so much happiness to me, too. I can't imagine a future without you in it. Will you marry me?" His words took my breath away. It wasn't just the proposal itself that surprised me, but how right it felt. Scott had been a part of my life for so long, first as a friend, and now as something much more.
He knew me in a way few people did.
He had seen me at my best and my worst, and yet he still wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. With tears in my eyes and a smile on my face, I answered him, "Yes, Scott." At that moment, I realized how far I had come. From heartbreak and loss, I had found not just a new purpose, but also a new love. Scott was a reminder that life can take unexpected turns, and sometimes those turns lead us to exactly where we are meant to be. I replied, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." In that moment, my heart felt full. I had found someone who truly saw me, loved me for who I was, and wanted to build a life with me. The simple word, yes, held so much meaning. It was not only a promise to Scott, but also a commitment to myself, to embrace happiness and love after all the pain and challenges I had faced. Our wedding was a simple yet beautiful affair. We chose to have it in the very gardens where Scott had proposed. Those gardens had become special to both of us, a place of peace and beauty. We invited the people who had become like family to meet the residents of the elderly home I had created, the staff, and a few close friends. The golden hues of the setting sun made the whole scene magical, as if the sky itself was blessing our union. As we stood under the fading light, Scott and I exchanged vows of love and commitment. It wasn't a grand event with lots of fanfare, but it was perfect. It was real, sincere, and full of heart. We promised to stand by each other through life's ups and downs, to always be kind, and to support one another. I knew, deep in my heart, that Scott was the partner I had always needed but had never expected to find. Life with Scott brought a sense of completeness I had never known before. It wasn't just about being happy. It was about feeling whole. Together, we faced the small challenges of everyday life, from fixing little things around the house to handling responsibilities at the elderly home. But no matter what came our way, we always tackled it together. Scott was supportive and kind, always offering a comforting word or a helping hand when I needed it. The house, which had once been a symbol of my fresh start, now became a symbol of our shared future. Every corner of the house seemed to reflect the love and happiness that had blossomed between us. The same halls that had once echoed with my loneliness were now filled with laughter, conversations, and the warmth of a loving home. I could see how much my life had transformed, and I was grateful for every step that had led me to this moment. Looking back on my journey, I realized how far I had come. From the dark days of despair and uncertainty after my father's death and my difficult divorce, to the joy and peace I now felt, it was an incredible transformation. Life had thrown many challenges my way, but each twist and turn had taught me something valuable. The pain I experienced in the past helped me appreciate the beauty and happiness of my life now. If I had never gone through those difficult moments, I might not have understood the value of what I had now. The tough times had made me stronger, more resilient, and more aware of the importance of love, kindness, and community. I realized that life is full of unpredictable twists, but each step along the way had brought me closer to where I was meant to be. The elderly home I had created also became a special part of our journey. It was more than just a place where people lived. It had become a thriving community. The residents were like family to me, and they had welcomed Scott into their hearts just as they had me. Our home was filled with laughter, stories, and love, not just from us, but from everyone who lived there. The sense of belonging and connection made every day meaningful. I often found myself reflecting on the power of new beginnings. With every sunrise, I was reminded that life is full of endless possibilities. No matter what challenges or hardships come our way, there is always room for hope and growth. Change is not something to fear, but something to embrace with an open heart. I had learned that lesson the hard way, but I was grateful for it. Scott and I began to plan for our future together, always looking ahead with excitement. We dreamed of expanding the home for the elderly, making it even more of a sanctuary for those who needed it. We wanted to continue helping others, just as my father had always wanted. In a way, by living out this dream, I felt like I was keeping a part of my father's legacy alive. I knew he would have been proud of the life I had built and the choices I had made. Together, Scott and I shared a deep sense of purpose. It wasn't just about our love for each other, but also about the love we shared with the community around us. We had found a way to blend our personal happiness with a mission that gave our lives deeper meaning. Each day felt like a gift, filled with moments of joy and connection. As I think about the days ahead, I feel a sense of peace. I know that life will continue to bring challenges, but I also know that I have the strength to face them. With Scott by my side and a community that thrives on love and respect, I look forward to whatever the future holds. I am no longer afraid of what's to come because I have learned to embrace the changes and the opportunities that come with them. In the end, I am profoundly grateful for everything the good and the bad that brought me to this moment. Without the pain, I wouldn't have appreciated the beauty of my life now. With each new day, I am reminded of how far I have come, and I know that the journey ahead will be filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. Life is full of surprises, and I am ready for whatever comes next.